I'm starting the recording. Hello and welcome again to the session on Marii Skłodowska-Curie postdoctoral fellowships. My name is Magdalena Chomicka and I represent the Office for International Research and Liaison. And today I'm going to tell you about the basics of the action of the program and on the application. It will be very basic on application because those of you who would like to apply to the currently open call are requested to join the training that will happen on Thursday. But those of you who consider applying next year, don't worry. I'm going to continue with this training each year the call is open. Okay, so let's get started. I'm sure many of you have already heard of Marii Skłodowska-Curie Fellowships. This is one of the European Commission action that supports researchers and research performing institution, may that be academic or non-academic institution. It supports the researchers in enhancing their skills in their international mobility and in advancing their skills and in increasing employability. The Marii Skłodowska-Curie postdoctoral fellowship is also marked with the 3I principle, so it's international because of mobility, and it's intersectoral because it fosters the cooperation between academia and the non-academic sector, and it is interdisciplinary as it fosters and encourages you to submit interdisciplinary proposals. Within those actions, like the intermediate goals of this action is to increase the employability of individual researchers and to increase your career paths, and also provide academic and non-academic experience. And this also should increase your employability both in academia and in the non-academic sector, in companies, in policy making, in non-governmental organizations. And since it's the cooperation between you, a supervisor, and the host institution, it fosters the two-way knowledge exchange. Okay, as you may already know, Marii Skłodowska-Curie actions are part of Horizon Europe grant. So whenever you think of Horizon Europe, Marii Skłodowska-Curie is there already. And it's in the first pillar that is called the excellent science. And the excellent science is the pillar where the researchers, may that be individual researchers or research consortia, they themselves build up their projects, because this pillar is a bottom-up pillar, so it fosters research on the bottom-up approach, and that means that the whole project from the very beginning is your own idea. Because in this pillar, the European Commission doesn't set any research priorities, contrary to Pillar 2 clusters, where you can see the priorities, the challenges that the world and Europe is facing. And the researchers should be looking for answers to those challenges. Whereas in the first pillar, you set those challenges yourself. So let's start with researchers who can apply. So it's you who plan to apply. You are either researcher, maybe we also have research support staff here with us, so you will know whom you can advise such fellowship. And if you are researchers who are considering applying, you need to remember that this action is foreseen for postdoctoral researchers only. So in order to apply, you have to meet the eligibility criteria that says that researchers who are in the possession of doctoral degree and who already successfully defended their doctoral thesis before the call deadline. And that means successfully defended, they have to be after the defense, and the defense has to be successful. That means that no corrections were needed, no adjustments were needed after that. And if you are obtaining, if you have obtained your PhD in Poland, we don't have this procedure. So you either have already the degree awarded, or you have at least defended your PhD thesis, then you're eligible to apply this year. And you don't need to provide any confirmation. You just tick in the proposal one of the declarations that you do possess the PhD, and then you have to provide the date of that. But you might be requested to provide documents that will confirm your degree at the stage of the grant agreement preparation. And you need to keep in mind that one researcher can submit only one proposal. So that means that if you consider applying with two host organizations, you always have to choose one. If you submit two proposals, the one that comes as the last will be evaluated. So one proposal, one research. And you have to meet the mobility rule, which is another eligibility criterion, because mobility is a key issue in the whole range of Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. And that means that you have to choose a host or institution in a country in which you have not resided, worked, studied, and carried out your main activity for more than 12 months in the last 3 years. Short stays such as holiday or family visits do not count towards the mobility rule. So basically, if you have been working in Poland for quite a long time, and if you don't meet this mobility rule, you may not apply with a Polish host institution. And as for PhD holders, for postdocs, you have to be you have to have no longer than 8 years of research experience post PhD, and this is calculated from the award of the first PhD. Why first? Because some people have different PhD degrees. Sometimes they shift their career paths towards other directions. And if there are people who have more than one PhD degree, only the award of the first one is considered as the reference date for calculating this 8-year research experience post PhD. But there are a reason that might extend this period of 8 years, and you can see the reasons here. So first of them is the maternity leave, and then it's 18 months per each child that was born after the PhD. And in case of paternity leave, this time of extension is calculated based on the exact duration, and then you have to provide documentation that you actually were absent at work for a given period of time. For people who had to undergo like compulsory national service, then it's another reason for extension. And if you were following your career paths also outside academia, if you were working in a company or if you were working outside of research, or you simply had a break due to other reasons, then you can also deduct this work that you were doing outside research from your 8 years experience. The same applies for long-term sick leave, but this applies to absence for more than 30 consecutive days. And for those researchers who were working in a third country, so basically outside Europe, this time that were spent outside Europe does not calculate towards this criterion, but it applies only for people who wish to reintegrate to Europe and continue their careers in Europe. And this applies only for people who are the citizens of a EU member state or an associated country. What is associated country? I'll tell you also later. So let's say you meet all the eligibility criteria. You would like to foster your research career, gain new experience, and build up your skills. But in order to do that, you have to find a supervisor. So a person who will be kind of a mentor, a guide, and a supervisor, and who will be helping you in carrying out your research. Because basically it's an individual grant, but with assistance of a supervisor. And it's generally someone you would like to learn from. For instance, if you would like to develop your research skill towards particular research methods, or you would like to gain a particular knowledge from someone who is more experienced than you, then it will be good to find someone like that with this profile in order to continue. In order to become a supervisor, that person needs to be employed at the host institution or institutions. Why plural? Then also explain. And that person needs to supervise you throughout the whole project duration, and also set some rules and for your mutual cooperation. And this will also be the person who will help you to prepare a individual career development plan. Why? Because if we talk about the research development, then you need to have a plan and to see what are you going to improve, what are your weaknesses with regards to your career goals, and how will you improve it at the host institution with the assistance of, of the supervisor. And this individual career development will be a mandatory deliverable provided your project receives funding. And for a global fellowship, so a fellowship that foresees mobility outside Europe, another supervisor needs to be appointed. So that's why a supervisor and host institution, because in this case, you will have to find two supervisors. And your supervisor, your mentor, will have to follow the guidelines on supervision that is a kind of set of the rules of best practices for cooperation between researchers, and best practices for welcoming and for setting hosting arrangements with incoming researchers within MSCA grants. And how to find a good supervisor? Usually, in most cases, this is someone from your own research network. So if you have network of collaborators, or your PhD supervisor here in Poland had a network, so or your team has a network of collaborators, then you can look in this group, because it's always the best to work with someone whom you already know, or who is known by your team members. You can also try international networking at conferences, at workshops, and so on. So if there's anybody you would like to work with, it's always good to ask if this person can supervise you in your MSCA project. But you can also use and try to look up for a supervisor in the matchmaking platforms that I'm going to show you. I usually prefer to go online and to show you those platforms. However, I prepared screenshots in these presentations, but you will get the slides after the webinar, and those screenshots will be also guiding you to those platforms. So starting from the left, it is actually the call website on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. So it's the entry point for finding the documents and for also submitting your proposal online. And as you can see, yesterday evening there were 33 items, so 33 hosting offers for people, for researchers who would like to apply with with a host institution in Europe for MSCA PF, so postdoctoral fellowship. And then on the right, you can see the screenshot from Euraxis website. So Euraxis is the portal that supports mobile researchers and also supports their career development. And here there are a lot more offers, because this is something that is widely let's say, recommended for looking for people to cooperate with in research. And you can also browse this website, the Reaccess website, with regard to a particular country or keywords, as you can see. But once you start, you have to always choose here the research program. And this is AH/MSCA, so Horizon Europe / Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. What are the good sides and the bad sides? So the good side is if you would like to go somewhere and still don't know where to go and with whom to work, then you can browse through these offers and to see if there's anything that might be interesting for you. On the other hand, sometimes those offers are really focused on a particular topic, and then depending on the supervisor, they may be like you'll have to strictly follow those guidelines and those topic description, or sometimes there is just like very vague description of the topic, sometimes just keywords, and then you'll be able to set your research question or hypothesis yourself and to build the whole research proposal. So then it's up to you. If you'd like to be really fully independent, then look for offers that are not described in detail. But if you need some guidance and maybe you will find a topic that will be interesting for you, then you can follow those offers that are described in more detailed way. There is also a third matchmaking platform that is a result of MSCA Net project, so the project of corporations of national contact points. This platform also has a lot of offers, but I think those two, so Euraccess and a call on funding and tender opportunities are easily to browse. And as for host institution, you can find by using those matchmaking platforms, you can find both supervisor and the host institution or host institutions, and those can be academic or non-academic. And that means that you can do your MSCA postdoctoral fellowship either at the university, in a research institute, but you might as well choose a company, uh, um, a non-governmental organization, a policy-making organization that will be able to help you to do the research there, and also that will be interested in your research results. And as for location, those can be institutions that are based either in an EU member state or in a Horizon Europe associated country. And an associated country is a country that signed an association agreement with the program, so with Horizon Europe, and this not equals the association with the European Union. So currently the countries that are associated are, for example, Norway, Iceland, Israel, and like the whole list. And you will have also a link that will guide you to the full list of currently associated countries, because those lists changes, and you always have to pay attention if there are more countries on the list. But you can also consider going outside Europe to a country that is considered as a third country, so it's a neither EU member state nor an associated country. And where to choose which, I'll tell you in a few minutes. And as a host institution and the hosting arrangements, if you go somewhere abroad, the host institution will have to sign an employment contract, employment agreement with you. So you'll be employed as a regular employee, as a regular researcher at these institutions. And the institution needs to appoint a supervisor for the whole duration of the project, and also offer you a set of trainings with regard to your research skills. And that will be basically done by the so-called training through research, so by the cooperation with your supervisor. But also you will be able to use all the trainings and soft skills or complementary skills, such as grant writing, such as publication strategy, and so on. But as well in soft skills such as like cooperation and team, time management, and so on. And it all has to be adjusted to your needs and to your career goals. And the institution needs to follow the principle of a charter and code, so the two EU documents that on the one hand set the rules for an ethical cooperation of researchers within an institution, so with ethical principles, and also with a set of requirements and duties, as well as responsibilities and possibilities. And the code is the code of conduct for a recruitment of researchers, so a document that allows for fair principles, like for fair recruitment of researchers. And also, just like the supervisor, the host institution needs to follow the principles of guidelines on supervision. And this document is also a document that has been prepared just for MSCA, so Skłodowska-Curie actions, and you will also have the link to the document. And as for another options within the project, because we were talking on your employment at the host institutions, but if there are any other institutions with which you could cooperate in order to add the value to your project with regard to research or with regard to the enhancements of your skills, you can foresee a kind of a temporary transfer to another entity in any country. And these kind of transfer are called secondments. So you are seconded for a given period of time to a different institution, and that can be both academic and non-academic institutions. And you can either perform research there or gain some experience. And you need to be also supervised by someone who is working in this institution. And as for money, there is no additional funding. You need to find funding for such placement, for such transfer within your project budget. And you can plan this secondment up to 1/3 of the standard project duration. And with regard to global fellowships, to the standard duration of the outgoing phase. And it can be like one secondment, it can be several secondments, but you always have to keep in mind that it has to add value to your project. So projects which do not foresee secondments will not be treated worse than those who foresee secondments, because secondments really have to be justified in the proposal and they have to be there for a reason. And it has to be already planned at the application stage. But you, for instance, might plan a secondment to a company, but you may say that you will be still trying to find this this company within when the project starts or shortly before the project starts. However, I suggest always to have a kind of pre-agreements with those companies, that companies, non-governmental organization, or other academic institution, because it can also be a research institution as well. So always appoint it already in your proposal. And there is another type of transfer that is possible in the project. And whereas secondment happened within the project duration, this non-academic placement happens after the project finishes. And this transfer is limited to entities in member state or associated countries, and it can be non-academic only. Because as I mentioned, Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions are the actions that foster the collaboration between academia and non-academia. And this offer you another possibility in order to cooperate with non-academic sector, to gain non-academic experience, to build your skills in non-academia. But again, you need to find a supervisor that will be appointed in these organizations. And in this case, you will have provided some additional funding for up to 6 months after your project finishes. And this has to be already planned at the application stage, because that means some funds had to be secured for your whole project. And for the types of fellowships, we have 2 types of fellowship. First of them is the European fellowship. So it's transfer either within Europe or reintegration to Europe or just coming to Europe, because it applies to researchers of any nationality. And at the application stage, they can reside in any country of the world, but they need to plan to come to Europe in order to do their MSCA grant in a European organization. And by European, I mean host institution and organization that are based in a member state, so EU member state, or a associated country, not a third country. And the duration, the minimum is 12 months, so no less than 1 year, and the maximum 24 months. And of course, you can plan secondments there, and also you can plan academic placement after the project finishes. So basically, your project can last 24 months, the usual project, and then you can plan also up to 6 months in a non-academic placement, and all of this will be funded by the project. And since we are in Europe, I would like to refer to two countries that might look problematic at this stage. First, it's Switzerland. Switzerland was associated to Horizon 2020, which was the previous framework program. Currently, Switzerland that wishes to associate. However, currently they have a status of a third country, so they can have, excuse me, a role of an associated partner, and that means they are not eligible as host institution for European fellowships. However, you can choose Switzerland, so Swiss institutions, for outgoing phase of a global fellowship. So European fellowship, no, but global fellowship, yes. And if you, sorry, if you wish to see some more information, there is a link provided that will guide you to the Swiss National Contact Point, and they always update the page. So maybe one day Switzerland will be associated, but currently this call, it's a third country. And now another country that poses problem, sorry, it's the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom currently is in the association, sorry. So the UK is currently in the process of association. So they are neither associated nor a third country anymore. However, the UK institution can be considered in the applications like a member state or associated country, so like associated country. And you can apply to the UK, to British institutions. But if by the time your grant agreement will have to be signed, if by that time the UK is not associated, then your project will not be funded by the European Commission, but the UK government have secured funds for such projects that receive positive outcomes, but will not be funded from Horizon Europe money. So you might apply, but you run a risk that eventually the project will not be supported by the European Commissions, and you will not be called MSCA Fellows because you will not be supported by MSCA grant. And the UK is not eligible for global fellowships because they are not a third country anymore. And as for global fellowship, if you wish to do your postdoc, within MSCA outside Europe, you can consider global fellowship, which is foreseen for nationals of EU member states of associated countries. And you have to find two host institutions. So for the first phase, you need to find a host institution and a supervisor that are based in a third country. So outside Europe, let's say the US, Canada, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, anywhere in the world. And then you have to plan a mandatory returning phase in Europe. And as for the mobility rule, application is not possible in country which you have lived, resided for more than 12 months within the last 3 years, applies only for the first phase. So it applies only for the phase in the third country, and it does not apply for the returning phase. So basically that means that you can go in the first phase to the US, and then you can return back to Poland, to your Polish home institution, meaning the University of Warsaw, but it can be any European institution, any institution that is in the member state or associated country. And you can also plan secondments, but only in the first phase. And you can plan the non-academic placement after the project finishes as well. And if you apply with a host institution that is based in so-called widening country, and there is another option for you that increases somehow the chances of getting your project funded. And as for the widening countries, these are the countries that have worse results than the EU average. And these countries, you have listed them. They are both EU member state and associated countries. And if you choose a host institution for the European Fellowship in those countries, you will also be asked in the application form if you agree to forward your proposal to ERA Fellowship. If your proposal will be scored high, but still it will be ranked below the budget line, because there is always a line at the budget line that separates the proposals that are funded and those that do not receive funding. And if you are below that list, below that separating list, and your host institution is based in one of these countries, you may also opt for ERA fellowships. And this part of fellowship will not be funded by MSCA funds. So that means that your project will still be funded with the scope that you have planned, in the place and supervisors that you have planned, but it will be funded by a different Horizon Europe program, and that means you will not be able to call yourself a MSCA fellow, and you will not be able to receive MSCA certificate, and then you will not be able to join MSCA Alumni Association. So there are pros and cons, but still there will be funding for your project that will be secured by the European Commission. So I guess it's still a very good option. And speaking of money, because a lot of researchers with whom I talk to say it's a very nice offer, but will I be able to survive in a foreign country? I'm sure you will, because the commission will pay both for your contract and also for costs of your research. So there are two groups of cost. First of them are researchers' cost, and then the institutional cost. Let's start with researcher cost. And the first point is the living allowance. So it will be your basic salary, and all these amounts that you see here are the monthly gross amounts. So the living allowance is set at 5,080 euros, and this is the amount that was estimated for Belgium. And having in mind that, you will have to look up for the so-called country correction coefficients, because each country has its own country coefficient. And that means that this living allowance will vary from country to country. And this is based on the cost of living in particular countries. So as you can see below, in Poland, it's 70.5, but if you go, for instance, to Germany, it's about around 100% out of this amount. But if you go, for instance, to Denmark, it's 132% of your gross salary. And then you will be also entitled to additional mobility allowance, so monthly 600 euro. To cover the cost of your moving to a different country. And in case you have family obligations, and by that the European Commission defines the marriage or the relationship of an equal status or dependent children, And if you if you meet those criteria, you will also be eligible for a family allowance. And there are also two allowances that might be considered in the budget. First is the long-term leave allowance, and there's a special calculation, and it is the kind of adjusting case if you, during your project implementation, will be on the sick allowance, and the European Commission will also cover the cost of the time spent on the sick allowance, but only in the cases when the Social Security offices take over the payment of, if they not take over the payments of social security charges. And in case of people who are eligible for special needs allowances, like people, for instance, with disabilities, if they request some more money just to as a top up for their salary, this can also be calculated in the project. And as I mentioned, these are gross amounts. So that means that the whole amounts are also calculated with all the taxes and all the security charges, and they'll be deducted. So you will see like your salary, your net salary will be lower than this. And they will be all paid based on the employment contract. And the family allowance will be only paid if it's applicable. So if you are meeting these criteria. And as for institutional cost, two groups, research, training, networking, it's called like this. And these are costs of your research, of your secondments, travels, open access publications, or trainings. And just to show you how the budgets will vary from country to country and from two options with family and without family, just to show you the differences. And as for calculation, you will not have to calculate anything, because appointing the country and saying yes, no to the eligibility with regards to family allowance, like the system will calculate the budget for you itself, the easiest budget calculation ever. And as for evaluation criteria of your project, there are three criterions. So the excellence, and impact, and implementation. And the excellence is with regard to content and training plan, then impact on science, economy, society, and your career. And implementation is about your project plan with details and the hosting arrangements in the host institution. But you have to keep in mind that those criteria have weights. So that means that that the most important criterion is the research excellence, and then less important is impact and implementation. And this is important with regards to projects who score the same number of points, and then the evaluators and the commission sees which one of those two projects scored higher in this particular criterion. So first they look at excellence, then on impact, and then implementation. And this is then calculated accordingly. Oh, I lost my presentation. Okay, I'm back. And you have to also keep in mind that these evaluation criteria equal proposal structure. So if you will be writing your proposal, if you see the evaluation, the proposal structures, then you have to be sure that the evaluators will look for every word that is described in the structure, because this also is the evaluation criteria. I will show you briefly the criteria. So as for excellence, you have to think of a project and that is innovative, that is ambitious, and that goes, of course, beyond the state of the art. You need to propose also the methodology, and if your project is anyhow interdisciplinary, you have to describe those interdisciplinary aspects in the project. And also you have to present if there is any gender dimension in your project with regard to the research content. So you have to keep that in mind, that the gender dimension in these calls does not refer to the equal balance, to the balance between the supervisor and the fellow and the researcher. So it doesn't have to be like a woman and a man in this team, but gender in this proposal refers to the research content. You also have to here present the quality of supervision. So who is your supervisor? An expert in a field, more experience than you, but you also have already some experiences, and then you have to present the two-way transfer of knowledge. So what you will learn from your supervisor and in your host institutions, institutions, and what knowledge will you share with these institutions. And you also have to present your current stage on the development of your career, and you also have to provide that you have appropriate skills and competences to carry out the project. And starting the impact part, you have to say how this project will enhance your career, how it will improve your employability. So how will that be part of your development? And you also have to present how will you share your research results with other researchers, how will you disseminate it? Maybe your research can be applied, for instance, in companies, in economy. Maybe you are bringing some new solutions to the market. So how will you exploit your project? And also, how will you tell people who are not experts, who are general public, how will you tell them about your project? Who will that be? Maybe students, maybe kids at schools and so on. So how will you communicate your project to non-specialists? You also have to think and consider how your research can impact society and economy, and also, of course, science. But that's the basics. And in the last part, you have to present the work plan. So you have to divide your project into work packages. You have to think if there are any risks that might occur, may that be research risk, administrative risks, and if they are of low possibility or of higher possibility. And if so, if there are any risks, do you have any mitigation plans, mitigation actions that will deal with those risks if they occur? And also you have to present how will the hosting arrangements are going to be. So how will you cooperate with your supervisor? How will you be both monitoring the project progress, and how the host institution will be supporting you in the project implementation? And why is good to really put a lot of effort in preparing and the project to be so that it's scored well. I'm showing you now two data sets, and these are the cutoff scores from the call 2021. And the cutoff score, that means that score that was the minimum score for a project to be funded. And these are the percentages. So as you can see, in some sciences, for instance, with regard to European fellowships in life sciences, the proposal had to score above 94% in order to get funding. It's differently, for instance, in physics and maths, but some panels require really high quality proposals. So you have to really pay a lot of attention and put a lot of effort in order to write a good proposal. The blue data is about global fellowships, the yellow about European fellowships. But as for success rates, they are not that bad actually, because it's around 14% for European fellowships and 16% for global fellowships. And the source of the data is the evolution guide that is prepared again by the MSCA NET project, so the project of cooperation of contact points. I'm still waiting for the data of 2022 calls, but I can only share 2021 outcomes now. So some do's and don'ts. Again, you have to start early, and I think June will be a good month to start with your proposals. And it will be good if you already have a supervisor chosen and a host institutions. And actually, I should have started with read all the necessary call documents. There are not many of those who are which are basic, like a guide for applicants or a work program. But sometimes, in some cases, you will be requested also to read some additional documents. For instance, if your project will be dealing with some ethical issues, you will also have to read an ethical guide in order to fill in the ethics table correctly. So you have to choose a country, find a host institution and a supervisor. You can do it the other way around. So first to look for the supervisor and then decide if to go to a particular institution or not. And it's good to plan really from whom you would like to learn. So you have to first assess your career. At this stage, you have to think of what you would like to learn, and then to think where is the best place to reach those goals and who is the best person to assist you in reaching those goals. So plan your research and training program. And then once you are starting with your proposals, always ask your supervisor for help first, because it is someone who is more experienced, and then you have to be sure that it is someone who will be able to advise you. And in case you have interdisciplinary projects, try to think and ask your supervisor if there is anyone in the institution who can also help you with an interdisciplinary project if your supervisor has knowledge and expertise in just one domain. And in case you would like to participate in any training like this, or those of you who are joining me on Thursday, so see you on Thursday on the detailed training, but you can also look for training sessions at national contact points websites. And in case you are going somewhere in Europe, always ask the national contact point in the destination country, because those are the experts who will help you with your proposal. Sometimes they do also, like in most cases, they do this proposal pre-screening, so they read through your proposal and then give you feedback on what has to be corrected. And once you see the proposal structure, you have to think of keeping the structure, sticking to page limits, and of course to the deadlines. And another issue that should make you think that your proposal has to be really well prepared is the resubmission restriction. Because once you are not successful this year and you might think of resubmitting your proposal in the next call, if you score less than 70% this year, you will not be allowed to resubmit your proposal next year. So you will have to wait 1 year, which is why all the proposals should be prepared in a very good way. And as for deadlines, the call was open on April 12th, and the deadline is September 13th at 5 p.m. Brussels time. So if you will be submitting your proposal from any other time zone, you have to keep in mind that it has to be 5 p.m. Central European time. And at 5 p.m. the servers will be closed and you will not be able to submit a proposal even a second past 5. The evaluation will take place between September and January next year, and you will receive information on the call results in February. And the European Commission estimates that starting from June, you will be able to sign the grant agreements. And those of you who would like to start the project as soon as possible, you can start planning your project for June already. Okay. If you have any questions, I will be happy to take them and open the Q&A sessions, but I will stop